Psalm 91, Prayer for Protection. Fall asleep in God's safe presence. There is a quiet moment like this, when the night has already settled around you, when the world has softened its edges, and yet a small part of you still feels like it hasn't fully arrived. Your body may be resting, your eyes may already be heavy, but somewhere beneath the surface, there is still a gentle awareness, a subtle sense that something inside you is still holding on, still staying just a little bit awake. And the truth is, it doesn't have to. You don't have to carry the weight of this day any further into this night. You don't have to keep watch over thoughts that have already passed. You don't have to solve what feels unfinished, or trace every feeling back to where it began. Right now, in this quiet space, you are allowed to step out of that place of holding and slowly, gently begin to rest. Because this moment is not empty. This moment is held. Even now, without effort, without striving, without needing to reach for anything, you are already within a presence that has never stepped away from you. A presence that does not rush you, does not pressure you, does not ask you to explain how you feel or why your mind is still moving. It simply remains steady, calm, and quietly near. And tonight, you don't have to find safety. You can begin to notice that you are already inside it. There is a part of you that has been so used to staying alert, not in a loud or overwhelming way, but in a quiet, almost invisible way. A part that keeps a gentle watch over everything, over your thoughts, your feelings, your surroundings, as if it has learned that it needs to stay just a little aware, just in case something needs your attention. But nothing here is asking that from you anymore. Not in this moment, not in this stillness. You are allowed to let that part of you rest too. As the night continues to settle, notice how the space around you feels softer now. The air doesn't press in on you. It doesn't demand anything. It simply holds you, the way the night was always meant to hold you, quietly, gently, without expectation. And within this stillness, there is something deeper, a quiet covering, a presence that does not need to announce itself to be real. The words of Psalm 91 begin to unfold here, not as something distant, not as something you have to reach toward, but as something you are already resting inside of. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. You don't have to strive to enter that place. You don't have to climb your way into it. You don't even have to fully understand it. Because in this moment, you are simply being invited to notice that you are already here, already held, already covered, already safe. Let your body rest a little deeper into whatever is supporting you. You don't need to adjust much. Just allow yourself to settle a little more than before. Let the surface beneath you take your weight fully, without resistance. There is nothing you need to hold up on your own right now. And as you rest, you might begin to notice your breath, not because you are trying to control it, but simply because it is there, moving in and moving out, quietly, steadily, without asking anything from you. You don't have to change it. You don't have to slow it down. It will begin to soften on its own as you do. And with each gentle breath, you can begin to feel how the space within you is also softening. The edges of your thoughts becoming less defined. The quiet tension you didn't fully notice before beginning to loosen, just slightly, just enough. You are not being asked to let go of everything all at once. You are simply being invited to let go of a little, and then a little more, not by force, but by permission, because there is something here tonight that is holding what you no longer need to carry, something steady, something unchanging, something that does not drift with your thoughts or shift with your emotions, a presence that remains. And as you begin to rest within that, you may notice a subtle shift, a quiet realization that you do not have to stay fully alert anymore. You do not have to keep watch over this moment. You do not have to stay on the edge of awareness, because the safety you may have been quietly searching for is not something you have to create. It is something you are already inside of. And as that realization begins to settle, even just a little, you can feel how your body responds to it. The muscles that were gently holding, beginning to release. The mind that was lightly moving, beginning to slow. Not because you made it happen, but because it no longer needs to keep going at the same pace. You are allowed to rest here. You are allowed to soften here. You are allowed to be covered without needing to check if it's real. Because his presence does not come and go with your awareness of it. It remains steady, quiet, near. And tonight, as you stay here for just a little longer, you may begin to notice that the part of you that felt like it had to stay awake is no longer holding as tightly as before. It's still there, but softer now, less urgent, less needed, and slowly, gently, it too can begin to rest. You don't have to rush this. You don't have to move forward too quickly. Just stay here for a moment longer in this quiet awareness that you are not alone, not unguarded, not uncovered. You are already within his presence, already within his protection. And as the night continues to hold you, you don't have to do anything more than remain here and allow that truth to settle a little deeper until even the quiet awareness of it begins to fade into rest, the weight you didn't notice you were carrying. There are moments like this when you begin to realize that what has been keeping you slightly awake is not something loud or urgent, but something much quieter, something that never asked for your attention during the day, yet somehow remained with you anyway. It isn't a single thought you can name, and it isn't one clear feeling you can trace. It's more like a gentle accumulation, a collection of small moments, unfinished thoughts, quiet reactions, all resting just beneath the surface. And without even noticing it, you carried it here. Not because you chose to, but because you've learned to hold things as you move through your day, to keep going, to respond, to adjust, to continue forward, even when something inside you hasn't fully settled yet. And by the time the night comes, your body may be ready to rest, but that quiet layer is still there, still being held, still waiting for a moment like this. But the gentle truth is, you don't have to carry it any further, not into this moment, not into this night. You don't have to sort through it. You don't have to understand it, and you don't have to resolve it before you are allowed to rest. Because the kind of rest your body is asking for right now does not come from finishing everything. It comes from setting things down. And maybe, just for this moment, you can begin to notice where that quiet weight has been sitting. Not with effort, not by searching for it, but simply by allowing your awareness to soften enough that you can feel what has been there all along. It might be in the way your shoulders are still holding slightly, or in the subtle tightness around your chest, or even in the way your thoughts gently circle back to something without fully staying there. There is no need to change any of it. Just noticing is enough, because the moment you notice, something begins to shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gently, almost imperceptibly, like something loosening its grip without needing to be told. And within this soft awareness, the words of Psalm 91 begin to settle a little deeper, not as something you have to think about, but as something you can begin to rest inside of. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. There is no pressure in those words, no urgency, no demand that you do anything more than dwell, then remain, then be. And maybe that is what this moment is quietly inviting you into. Not a place you have to reach, but a place you can simply allow yourself to stay. Because what you have been carrying was never meant to be held all the way into rest. You were never meant to bring the full weight of your day into the place where your soul begins to soften. And yet, you did, because that is what you have learned to do. But now, you are allowed to do something different. You are allowed to set it down. Not by forcing it away, not by pushing it out, but by gently releasing your hold on it. Just a little. And then a little more. You don't have to drop everything at once. You don't have to create a complete sense of emptiness inside your mind. All you are doing is loosening your grip enough for something else to begin holding what you no longer need to. Because you are not letting it fall into nothing. You are placing it into a presence that is already here. A presence that does not rush you, does not require explanation, does not ask you to organize what you feel before you are allowed to rest. It simply receives, quietly, steadily, without resistance. And as you begin to allow that, you may notice how your body responds in small ways. The way your shoulders soften just slightly, without you needing to move them. The way your jaw loosens, almost as if it had been holding something you didn't realize. The way your breath begins to feel a little deeper, not because you changed it, but because something inside you is beginning to let go. You are not doing this. You are allowing it. And that is enough. Because within this gentle release, something else begins to take its place. Not effort, not control, but a quiet sense of being held. A subtle awareness that you are no longer the one carrying everything in this moment, that the weight you didn't even realize you were holding is no longer resting entirely on you. And you don't have to check if it's working. You don't have to measure whether you've let go enough. You don't have to go back and pick anything up again. You can simply remain here in this soft, quiet space where nothing is being asked of you and nothing needs to be held in place. Because the safety you are resting inside of right now is not something fragile. It does not depend on how well you let go. It does not disappear if your thoughts briefly return. It remains steady, even when your awareness shifts. And as that realization begins to settle, you may notice something else. The part of you that felt like it had to keep holding is beginning to relax. Not completely, not all at once, but enough. Enough for your body to feel a little heavier in a way that is not uncomfortable, but grounding, supported, safe. Enough for your thoughts to feel less urgent, less demanding, as if they no longer need to keep moving in the same way. And you don't have to guide this process. You don't have to lead yourself into rest. You are simply allowing yourself to be led by a presence that has always been steady, always been near, always been holding more than you could carry on your own. And as you stay here, just a little longer, you may begin to feel how natural it is to not hold everything, how natural it is to not stay fully alert, how natural it is to begin letting this moment carry you instead of you carrying it. You don't have to rush into the next feeling. You don't have to move forward too quickly. Just remain here for a moment longer as what you've been holding continues to soften, continues to loosen, continues to be gently placed into something that does not let it fall. And in that quiet exchange, something inside you is already beginning to rest, slowing what never had a chance to stop. There is a certain kind of movement that doesn't feel fast, and yet it never really stops. It isn't the kind of rushing that overwhelms you or pulls you in too many directions at once. It's quieter than that, more subtle, like a gentle current beneath the surface of your thoughts that continues to move, even when everything around you has already become still. And perhaps that is what you're beginning to notice now, not something loud, not something urgent, but something that has been quietly continuing without ever being asked to pause. And the reason it has felt this way is not because you did anything wrong. It's because there was never really a moment for it to stop. From one part of your day to the next, your mind kept flowing. One thought gently leading into another. One moment blending into the next without a clear place where everything was meant to slow down completely. And even when the day ended, that quiet movement simply carried itself into the night. So now, as you find yourself here in this stillness, there is a small part of you that is still moving at the same pace it has been all along. Not fast enough to feel overwhelming, but not slow enough to fully rest. And the gentle truth is, you don't have to force it to stop. You don't have to interrupt it. You don't have to quiet it all at once, because slowing is not something you create. It is something that happens when nothing is pushing you forward anymore. And right now, nothing is. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to respond to, nothing that requires your attention in this moment. And as that becomes more real to you, even just a little, you may begin to notice how that quiet movement inside your mind starts to shift. Not by stopping suddenly, but by softening its pace, like a stream that no longer needs to rush, because it has reached a place where it can simply flow gently, without urgency. And you don't have to watch it closely. You don't have to guide it. You don't have to check whether it's slowing down enough. All you are doing is allowing there to be no reason for it to keep moving the way it was before. And within that space, the words of Psalm 91 continue to unfold, not as something separate from you, but as something you are gradually settling deeper into. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. There is a softness in that image, not something that presses in on you, not something that controls or confines, but something that gently surrounds you, creating a space where nothing needs to rush and nothing needs to stay alert. A place where slowing feels natural. Because you are not exposed, you are not unguarded, you are not alone in this moment, you are covered. And as that sense of covering begins to settle, you may notice how your thoughts respond to it. They don't need to move as quickly. They don't need to circle back as often. They don't need to hold on to the same things with the same energy, because something else is now holding this moment for you. And as that realization deepens, even slightly, your breath may begin to follow. Not in a way that you control, not in a way that you have to think about, but in a way that simply happens as your body recognizes that it no longer needs to stay in motion. Each breath arriving a little more fully, each exhale releasing a little more gently. And in between those breaths, there is space. Soft, quiet, unoccupied space. And that space is where the slowing begins to deepen. Not because you are trying to make it happen, but because there is nothing left that needs to keep it from happening. You don't have to fill that space with anything. You don't have to replace your thoughts with something new. You don't have to guide yourself into a specific feeling. You can simply remain here, allowing that space to exist, allowing it to expand, allowing it to gently reshape the pace of everything within you. And as you do, you may notice that the movement that once felt continuous is no longer as steady as before. There are small pauses now, small gaps between thoughts, moments where nothing is being carried forward. And in those moments, something deeper begins to emerge. A quiet stillness that doesn't need to be created because it was always there, just beneath the movement. And now, as the movement softens, that stillness begins to come forward. You don't have to hold on to it. You don't have to protect it. It remains even as your awareness drifts. Because this stillness is not fragile. It is part of the presence you are resting within. A presence that does not rush. A presence that does not shift with your thoughts. A presence that remains steady even as everything else slows. And as you stay here just a little longer, you may begin to feel how natural it is to move at this softer pace. How natural it is to not keep everything going. How natural it is to allow your mind to settle without needing to guide it there. You are not losing control. You are being carried into rest. And as that continues to unfold, gently, quietly, without effort, the part of you that once kept things moving begins to release its role. Not because it disappears, but because it is no longer needed in the same way. And you don't have to say anything to it. You don't have to convince it. It simply begins to understand that it can rest too. And as it does, the slowing becomes deeper, softer, more natural, until even the awareness of slowing begins to fade into something quieter still, releasing without understanding everything. There is a quiet space that begins to open once things have slowed enough, where you may start to notice something deeper beneath the movement of your thoughts. It is not a new thought, and it is not a clear feeling you can easily describe, but more like a gentle awareness that there are still things you haven't fully figured out. Small questions that never found their answers, moments that didn't fully make sense, feelings that passed through you without ever being clearly named. And even now, in this stillness, there may be a part of you that feels like it should go back, just for a moment, to understand it better, to trace it, to organize it, to bring a kind of quiet clarity before allowing yourself to fully rest. But the gentle truth is, you don't need to understand everything tonight. You don't need to complete every thought. You don't need to close every open space in your mind before you are allowed to let go. Because rest does not come from having all the answers. It comes from being held, even without them. And maybe, just here, in this quiet moment, you can begin to notice what it feels like to not follow those thoughts back to where they began. Not to resist them, not to push them away, but simply to not continue them, to let them exist, just as they are, without needing to become anything more. And as you allow that, something begins to shift. Not suddenly, not in a way that demands your attention, but gently, like a thread that loosens because you are no longer pulling on it. And within that soft release, the words of Psalm 91 begin to settle even deeper. Not as something you have to interpret, but as something you can quietly rest inside. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day. There is no urgency in these words, no pressure to eliminate every thought, no demand to make everything feel resolved, only a quiet assurance that you are not required to stay in a place of guarding or anticipating or preparing for what might come next. Because in this moment, nothing is coming toward you that needs your attention. Nothing is asking you to remain alert. Nothing is requiring you to understand it before you are allowed to rest. And as that truth begins to settle, even just a little, you may notice how your mind responds. The thoughts that once felt like they needed to be followed begin to feel less urgent. The questions that once pulled at your attention begin to soften, as if they no longer need to be answered right now. Not because they are unimportant, but because they are no longer yours to carry in this moment. You are allowed to place them somewhere else, not into emptiness, not into silence alone, but into a presence that remains steady, whether you understand everything or not. And as you begin to allow that, you may notice a subtle change in how your body feels. The slight tension that came from holding on to those unanswered things beginning to loosen. The quiet alertness that stayed with you beginning to soften. Not because everything has been resolved, but because you are no longer holding it in the same way. And you don't have to measure how much you've let go. You don't have to check whether you've released enough. You are simply allowing yourself to not carry it any further. And that is enough. Because within this gentle release, something deeper begins to take its place. Not clarity, not certainty, but a quiet sense of being covered, even in the unknown. A sense that you do not have to stand watch over what you don't understand. A sense that you are safe, even without finishing the story. And as that feeling begins to grow, softly, quietly, you may notice how your awareness begins to change. It no longer feels pulled in different directions. It no longer feels like it has to return to something unfinished. It begins to settle right here, in this moment, without needing to go anywhere else. And that is where rest begins to deepen. Not when everything is clear, but when nothing needs to be clear for you to remain at peace. You are allowed to be here without resolving everything. You are allowed to rest without completing every thought. You are allowed to release without understanding every feeling, because the presence you are resting within does not depend on your clarity. It does not wait for your understanding. It remains steady, covering, holding, whether your mind is quiet or still gently moving. And as you stay here, just a little longer, you may begin to feel how natural it is to not follow every thought to its end. How natural it is to allow things to remain unfinished without needing to carry them. How natural it is to simply rest in the middle of what you do not fully understand. And slowly, gently, the part of you that once felt like it needed to figure everything out begins to soften, not disappearing, but no longer leading. And as it releases that role, something quieter begins to guide you, something that does not ask questions, something that does not seek answers, something that simply holds you exactly where you are. And within that, your thoughts become lighter, more distant, less defined, until even the need to release them begins to fade and you find yourself resting without needing to understand why, becoming aware of his presence. There is a gentle shift that begins to happen here, not because something new has arrived, but because something that has always been here is becoming easier to notice. Up until now, you have been allowing things to soften, allowing the weight to settle, allowing the quiet movement of your thoughts to slow, and allowing what you don't fully understand to simply remain where it is. And in that softening, in that slowing, in that quiet release, space has begun to open within you. Not an empty space, but a receptive one. A space that is no longer filled with holding or searching or needing to resolve, but a space that can now begin to feel something deeper, something quieter, something that does not push forward but gently surrounds. And maybe, even now, you can begin to notice it, not as a thought, not as something you have to imagine, but as a presence that does not move quickly, that does not demand your attention, that does not need to be explained before it can be felt. It is simply there, steady, calm, and quietly near. And the more you allow yourself to rest, the more natural it becomes to recognize that you were never outside of it. You were always within it. Even in the moments when your mind was still moving, even when you were holding on to things, even when you felt like you hadn't fully arrived, this presence did not step away. It remained. And now, as everything within you begins to quiet, it becomes easier to feel. The words of Psalm 91 begin to take on a different kind of meaning here, not as something you are thinking about, but as something you are gently experiencing from within. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. There is something deeply personal in that, not distant, not abstract, but close. A refuge is not something far away. It is something you are already inside of. A place where you do not have to stay alert. A place where you do not have to protect yourself. A place where your body and your mind can begin to rest without needing to watch what comes next. And as that understanding begins to settle, you may notice how your awareness starts to change. It no longer feels like it is scanning or checking or preparing. It begins to rest right here within this quiet presence without needing to move beyond it. And within that, there is a softness, a kind of stillness that is not empty, but full in a way that is difficult to describe, yet easy to feel. It does not press in on you. It does not surround you tightly. It simply holds gently, without effort, without expectation. And you don't have to reach toward it. You don't have to deepen it. You don't have to make it stronger. It remains, whether you focus on it or not. And as you allow yourself to simply remain here, you may begin to notice small shifts in how your body feels. The way your muscles continue to release, not because you are telling them to, but because they no longer need to stay engaged. The way your breath continues to soften, finding a rhythm that feels slower, more natural, more at ease. The way your thoughts no longer feel like they need to lead you anywhere, but instead begin to drift lightly without direction. All of this happening gently because something deeper is now holding this moment for you. You are not guiding yourself into rest. You are being held within it. And as that becomes more real, even just a little, you may notice how the sense of being alone in your thoughts begins to fade. Not suddenly, not completely, but enough for a new awareness to take its place. You are not alone here, not in this stillness, not in this quiet, not in this moment of letting go. There is a presence with you, steady, unchanging, not shifting with your thoughts, not moving with your emotions, but remaining exactly where it has always been. And you don't have to hold on to that awareness tightly. You don't have to keep reminding yourself, because even when your attention drifts, even when your thoughts soften further, even when you begin to move towards sleep, this presence does not fade. It does not depend on your awareness to remain. It remains because it is who he is. And as you rest here just a little longer, you may begin to feel how natural it is to allow yourself to be held in this way. How natural it is to not stand on your own in this moment. How natural it is to let your awareness soften while something else remains steady beneath it all. You don't have to stay fully present. You don't have to stay fully aware. You don't have to hold on to this moment. You can simply remain and allow yourself to be gently carried by a presence that does not let you drift away unguarded, but holds you quietly, completely, without effort. And as that continues to unfold slowly, gently, without you needing to guide it, your awareness begins to soften even more. The edges of your thoughts becoming less defined, the sense of you holding on to this moment becoming lighter. And in its place, there is only this quiet presence, this steady covering, this gentle awareness that you are not alone and have never been. And as that realization settles deeper, even the need to notice it begins to fade, leaving only the feeling of being held as your mind continues to soften and your body continues to rest within his presence. Feeling safe without needing proof. There is a subtle place you begin to enter now where the question is no longer, am I safe? But something quieter, something deeper, something that no longer needs to be asked in the same way. Because up until this point, even as you've been resting, even as things have softened, there may still have been a small part of you, almost unnoticeable, that was quietly checking. Not in a tense or fearful way, but in a gentle, habitual way. As if it had learned over time to stay just slightly aware, just in case something shifts, just in case something changes, just in case something needs your attention again. And that part of you has done its best to keep you steady. But here, in this moment, it no longer needs to keep watch. Not because everything has been explained, not because every outcome is certain, but because the safety you are resting in is not something that depends on your awareness of it. It does not come and go. It does not require your attention to remain. It simply is. And as that begins to settle, even just a little, you may notice how that quiet checking within you starts to soften. It doesn't need to disappear. It doesn't need to be pushed away. It simply begins to relax because it is no longer needed in the same way. And within that softening, something else begins to take its place. Not control, not certainty, but trust. Not a forced trust, not something you have to convince yourself of, but a quiet, natural trust that begins to rise when you are no longer holding everything on your own. And within that trust, the words of Psalm 91 begin to feel even closer now, less like something you are listening to, and more like something you are resting inside of. Under his wings, you will find refuge. There is a softness in that image that does not demand anything from you. It does not ask you to prove that you trust. It does not require you to fully understand what it means. It simply offers a covering, a gentle place where you do not have to check what is happening outside, where you do not have to stay aware of every possibility, where you do not have to keep yourself safe because you are already being held. And maybe, just here, you can begin to feel what that is like without needing to define it. The way your body continues to settle just a little deeper. The way your breath continues to soften without you guiding it. The way your thoughts no longer feel like they need to scan or return to anything, Because something within you is beginning to understand that it is safe to stop checking. You don't have to look ahead. You don't have to look behind. You don't have to measure this moment. You don't have to make sure everything is okay. Because in this space, you are already okay. Not because everything is perfect, not because nothing ever changes, but because the presence you are resting within does not shift with those things. It remains steady, unmoved, unchanging. And as that truth begins to settle deeper, you may notice how your body responds. The subtle holding that remained beginning to release even more. The quiet alertness that stayed in the background beginning to fade. The sense that you needed to stay just a little aware beginning to dissolve. And you don't have to follow that process. You don't have to guide it. You don't have to make sure it continues. You are simply allowing it by no longer holding on to what once required your attention. And as that continues, gently, quietly, you may begin to feel something else, a softness that feels different than before, not just the absence of tension, but the presence of comfort, a sense of being covered, not tightly, not heavily, but lightly, gently, in a way that allows you to breathe, to rest, to soften even more. And within that, your awareness begins to drift further from the need to understand anything at all. You don't need to know how this safety works. You don't need to trace where it comes from. You don't need to confirm that it will remain, because it is not something fragile. It does not depend on your thoughts. It does not change with your awareness. It simply holds you, whether you are thinking about it or not. And as that realization becomes quieter, more natural, more settled, you may notice how your thoughts begin to thin, not disappearing all at once, but becoming lighter, more distant, less defined. And the space between them becomes more present, more noticeable, more restful. And within that space, there is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to hold, nothing you need to check. Only this gentle, steady, quiet sense that you are already within something safe, already within something that does not let you fall unguarded, already within a presence that continues to hold you, even as your awareness softens, even as your thoughts drift, even as your body begins to move closer to rest. You don't have to stay here consciously. You don't have to hold on to this feeling. You can begin to let yourself drift just a little more, knowing that nothing is lost when you do, because the safety you are resting in remains, even as you let go. And as you allow that even more deeply, the part of you that once needed proof begins to fade. Not because it has been convinced, but because it is no longer needed. And in its place, there is only this quiet trust, this gentle covering, this steady presence, holding you completely without needing anything from you in return. Letting God restore what you didn't notice was drained. There is a kind of tiredness that doesn't always feel heavy, not in a way that draws your full attention, but in a quieter way, a steady, almost invisible draining that happens as you move through your day. It comes from holding small things, responding to moments, staying present even when something inside you needed a pause that never quite came. And because it never asked loudly, it was easy to miss, easy to carry it forward, easy to arrive here, not realizing how much of your strength has already been given away in small, quiet pieces. But now, in this stillness, as everything has softened, as your thoughts have slowed, as the need to understand and to check has begun to fade, you are entering a space where something different can begin to happen. Not more effort, not more letting go, but receiving. You don't have to create rest anymore. You are being restored within it. And the gentle truth is, restoration does not always feel like something happening. It doesn't always arrive with a clear shift or a noticeable change. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. Just quiet, just stillness, just the absence of what once felt slightly heavy. And yet, within that quiet, something deeper is already taking place. Something that does not depend on your awareness. Something that does not require your participation. Something that simply begins. when you stop holding everything on your own. And as you remain here, just as you are, you may begin to sense how natural it is to not be the one sustaining yourself in this moment. You don't have to keep your thoughts steady. You don't have to keep your emotions balanced. You don't have to maintain anything, because what is holding you now does not require your effort to continue. And within that, the words of Psalm 91 begin to settle even deeper. Not as something you are listening to, but as something quietly unfolding within the space you are resting in. His faithfulness will be your shield and your rampart. There is a steadiness in that does not rise and fall with how you feel. It does not weaken when you are tired. It does not shift when your awareness drifts. It remains constant, whether you notice it or not. And that is where restoration begins. Not in what you do, but in what remains, even when you do nothing. And as you allow yourself to stay here without trying to feel anything specific, you may begin to notice small changes, not dramatic, not demanding your attention, but gentle. The way your body feels slightly heavier, not with tension, but with release. The way your breath moves more slowly, more evenly, without effort. The way your thoughts no longer gather in the same way, but begin to space out, becoming softer, less connected, less necessary. All of this happening quietly, because something within you is no longer being drained in the same way, and something else is beginning to fill that space. Not energy in a way that wakes you up, but restoration in a way that allows you to rest more deeply. You are not being asked to take anything in. You are simply no longer holding everything out. And that is enough, because within this stillness, your body remembers how to restore itself. Your mind remembers how to settle. Your spirit remembers how to rest in something greater than itself. And you don't have to guide that process. You don't have to help it along. You don't have to check whether it's happening. It is already unfolding, quietly, steadily, without interruption. And as that continues, you may begin to feel how distant the earlier tension has become, how faint the need to hold, to check, to understand now feels. Not because it was removed by force, but because it has been gently replaced by something more steady, something that does not require your attention to remain. And within that, your awareness begins to soften even further, not focusing on anything in particular, not holding on to any single thought, simply resting within this quiet unfolding where nothing is being asked of you and everything that needs to happen is already happening. You are not responsible for restoring yourself right now. You are being restored by remaining. And as that realization becomes quieter, more natural, more settled, even the awareness of restoration begins to fade, leaving only this, a gentle sense of being held, a quiet feeling of being sustained, a steady presence that does not shift, even as you drift further from conscious thought. And within that, your body continues to soften, your breath continues to slow, your thoughts continue to loosen, until everything begins to feel lighter, quieter, more distant, as if you are no longer at the center of it, but gently resting within something that holds it all. And you don't have to stay aware of this. You don't have to remain present. You don't have to follow what is happening. You can begin to drift even more deeply now, knowing that nothing is lost when you do. Because what is holding you remains. What is restoring you continues. What is covering you does not fade. And as you allow yourself to move further into that, the last traces of effort begin to dissolve, and rest begins to take you without resistance, without interruption, without needing anything more from you, drifting inside his protection. There is a point where the quiet becomes so gentle, so complete, that you no longer feel like you are actively resting, but rather being carried by the rest itself. And maybe you are beginning to notice that now. Your thoughts no longer forming in the same clear way. Your awareness no longer holding on to each moment as it passes. Your body no longer needing to adjust or respond or stay connected to everything around you. It is all becoming softer, more distant, more fluid, as if the edges of everything are slowly dissolving into something quieter still. And you don't have to follow that change. You don't have to stay with it. You don't have to understand it, because this is not something you are doing. This is something you are being gently carried into. And within this soft drifting, the words of Psalm 91 remain, not as something you are thinking about, but as something that continues to hold you, even as your awareness begins to fade. No harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your dwelling. There is no urgency in these words, no tension, no need to hold on to them tightly. They do not ask you to stay awake. They do not ask you to stay aware. They simply remain steady, quiet, present, even as you begin to drift further away from conscious thought. And that is where you are now. Not fully here, not fully gone, but gently, softly, in between, where thoughts no longer need to be completed, where awareness no longer needs to be held, where everything begins to feel lighter, more distant, less defined. And you are allowed to go there. You are allowed to let yourself drift without holding on to anything, because the safety you are resting in does not depend on your awareness. It does not require your attention. It does not fade when you stop noticing it. It remains even as you let go. And as you allow yourself to move further into that, you may notice how your thoughts begin to break apart, not disappearing suddenly, but becoming fragments, then softer, then quieter, until they no longer feel like something you need to follow. And in between those fragments, there is space, wide, open, quiet space. And within that space, there is nothing to hold, nothing to think, nothing to return to, only this gentle, steady drifting, where everything is being carried for you. And you don't have to stay with any part of this. You don't have to remain aware of what is happening. You don't have to guide yourself any further, because you are already being guided into rest, into stillness, into sleep. And within that, your body continues to release even more deeply. The last small areas of tension softening without effort. The breath becoming slower, quieter, almost unnoticeable. The sense of where your body rests beginning to fade as everything becomes lighter, more distant, more removed from awareness. And you don't have to hold on to any of it. You don't have to stay connected to it. You can let it all drift, just as it is, because nothing is being lost. Nothing is slipping away. Everything that needs to remain, remains. And everything that can be released is gently falling away without resistance. And within that, there is only this quiet sense that you are still being held, still being covered, still within a presence that does not shift, even as you drift further from awareness. And as that continues, you may notice that even the awareness of drifting begins to fade. You are no longer watching it happen. You are no longer inside the process. You are simply being carried deeper, softer, further away from the need to stay here. And that is enough. You don't have to go any further on your own. You don't have to stay with this moment. You don't have to remain aware of anything at all. You can simply allow yourself to drift completely, gently, without effort, knowing that you are not drifting alone. You are drifting within His protection, within His presence, within something that remains steady, even as you fall into rest, even as you fall into sleep, even as everything softens and fades and becomes still, falling asleep in God's safe presence. And now there is almost nothing left to hold. No thoughts that need to be followed, no feelings that need to be understood, no awareness that needs to stay awake just a little longer. Everything has already begun to soften, to settle, to fade into something quieter, something deeper, something that no longer asks anything from you. And you don't have to do anything more. You don't have to move closer to rest. You are already there, gently, naturally, without effort. As the night continues to hold you, you may notice how distant everything feels now. Not in a way that separates you, but in a way that frees you from needing to stay connected to anything at all. The world has become quiet. Your thoughts have become light. Your body has become still. And within that stillness, there is only this quiet awareness that you are not alone, not uncovered, not unguarded. You are still within his presence. Even now, as your awareness fades, as your thoughts drift beyond form, as your body rests without effort, nothing about that presence changes. It does not grow weaker. It does not move further away. It remains steady, quiet, near. The words of Psalm 91 no longer need to be remembered. They no longer need to be repeated. They have already settled into the space you are resting in. They have already become part of the stillness holding you, and you don't have to return to them. You don't have to hold on to anything, because everything that needed to be said has already become something you can simply rest inside of. You are covered, you are held, you are safe, not because you are staying aware of it, but because it remains true, even as you let go. And as that truth becomes quieter, softer, more distant from your thoughts, your awareness continues to fade, gently, naturally, without resistance. There is no need to stay here, no need to remain present, no need to follow anything further. You can let yourself drift completely now. Let the last edges of awareness soften. Let the final thoughts fade without finishing. Let the quiet stillness take you the rest of the way. And as you do, nothing is lost. Nothing is left behind, because what holds you remains. What covers you continues. What surrounds you does not fade, even as you fall asleep. You are not stepping out of his presence. You are resting deeper within it. And there is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to say, nothing more you need to be aware of. Only this gentle, quiet, steady rest, where everything has already been placed, everything has already been covered, everything has already been held as you drift softly, completely into sleep.